yeah, so this is what a base, one of the things a base is going to look like at the end of a wave defense run. I, and there are a couple of main features of the main bottlenecks that pretty much all the competitive wave defense bases look like now. You've got a bunch of copper mining, you've got 3 lanes of copper smelting, most of that's going into green chips. You know, everyone builds the green chips slightly differently, and the petrochem is kind of different, and the red circuits and blue chips and modules and stuff like that, get built slightly differently. But the main bottlenecks that all the wave defense bases are facing are how do you get your 3 lanes of copper smelting and turned into green chips as fast as you can, because that's kind of the main thing you're looking at for your rocket components. This takes some light oil, that's fine. This takes a bunch of stuff. You can cache the copper, it's fine. It's still the copper bottleneck, and then you need a lot of semiconductors to do your RCUs. And wave defense at the moment, we're kind of minimizing the time you want to spend in combat at all. I mean, that's kind of be the case for speedruns anyway. Like, you want to minimize all the time you spend on anything. But wave defense is down to, maybe you've got a car, which I don't even know where I left my car on this run, doesn't matter. Maybe you've got a car, maybe you've got some landmines. You don't spend more than a couple of minutes outside the base. Maybe you're automating some artillery. You don't go outside your base at all, and you spend a couple of minutes automating artillery, and that's done. Maybe you spend a couple of minutes at the beginning of the game YOLOing some turrets into any of your bases and getting killed immediately and coming back to get more bots. You spend a couple of minutes at high-level wave defense actually doing wave defense, and the rest of the time you're automating a base that launches a rocket using 3 lanes of copper. And Rocket Rush, I reckon, is going to end up being kind of similar in a way that's not necessarily super interesting, given that wave defense already exists. Like, if wave defense didn't exist, Rocket Rush default settings, quite interesting. Lots of interesting stuff to discover, in the same way that, all of this was interesting to figure out what the best way to get it done was. And yeah, let's back up and look at what we get at the beginning of a wave defense game, just to make that point again. Wave defense map doesn't matter. Take the stuff. We have we got 50 mining drills. We got 100 of each inserter. You probably want more basic inserters because you're trying to build smelt lanes and stuff like that. We've got a lot of belt. We've got a bunch of assemblers. We've got more intermediates to build the things you want. You start with a power grid. You have all the tools you immediately need to go pretty quickly, and then it's down to mining a lot of copper, doing a bit of petrochem. You don't even max out the iron mining on your starter patch in wave defense most of the time, and yeah, you just take the stuff and go and do a bunch of things. If we wander over to Rocket Rush, new game, Rocket Rush on default settings. Actually, I need to know where a base is for this. Okay, so I can go south and a bit west and find some places. Cool. Yeah. Let's go and poke around this Rocket Rush thing. In default settings Rocket Rush, you start with so much stuff that you can still just go and buy almost everything you want. Let's have some of these. Let's have 10 of those and 10 of these. Let's get some initial fuel for our power grid, so we don't even have to worry about automating coal. A little bit of that for run safety. Get a car. I think I did something like this. I had an actual pattern of what I would do when I was slightly more seriously running this. Is this? I think I need some pipes. I think the point is made though. I've got 70 miners. I've got a bunch of stuff that I need to put my smelt lane together. I'm starting with a car, which is pretty wild. Take these things off the menu. I've got all the stuff that I want, and in that sense, there's a very fast start. In the same way, there's a very fast start on wave defense. You could just go and immediately do all the stuff. And so, all the recipes are the same. We start with a huge amount of stuff. We're also not spending much time on the combat at all. which, and like the tools aren't the same, but like let's quickly wander down here and do, so we start on 80% Evo, big biters are out. I've also already got all the upgrades, like the wave defense, you would have to do combat to work through all of these, and like so the wave defense gives you 10% per thing, whereas some of these end up equivalent to multiple wave defense levels. So this one is 40, yeah, so this one by itself is worth 4 levels of wave defense upgrades. And we start with all of them, so the guns are immediately fantastic. The rockets will immediately one-shot nests. We've got 100 rockets, and we can just wander in and go stuff like... I didn't even put half the bullets in there. So like this is what combat can look like when you're doing rocket rush, because they just give you rockets, so it's fine. And then these guys run at you and you're like, okay, cool. I've also got, I again failed the micro of putting all the bullets in all the turrets. But that's how quickly you can push bases in Rocket Rush. And I've got, another 95 rockets, another 95 bases, and I don't reckon even from the preview there were 95 bases that would be enough of a challenge within the radius of pollution cloud I would generate launching a rocket from, these patches. I think that'd be fine. I think Rocket Rush Normal will end up basically like wave defense. Like you've got to make your own silo. So you need some more steel and some more blue chips, and neither of those are particularly a big deal. A lot of wave defense runs ended up high on steel anyway. You got to make some electric engines and some concrete, so maybe there's a bit of a diversion for hand feeding some stuff, or maybe automating some small builds early or whatever, but like it's still mostly the same recipes. You start with all the stuff you want, and you don't spend much time on combat. It's probably going to be another 3 lanes of copper thing, and so I've done a couple of the Rocket Rush runs, and it's the same wave defense base again. You can just more or less build your wave defense base in Rocket Rush, and you'll be largely fine. Probably a couple of divergences would make it faster. Probably Rocket Rush will still end up slightly slower than wave defense overall because you have to make the silo, but like not a big deal. And that got me wondering about a different thing. What if we played some Rocket Rush, but we did it on Deathworld Marathon? And this is interesting for a number of reasons, I reckon. Number one, Marathon doesn't get a lot of love in any of the speedrunning categories, I don't think, because it's just slower. Like, you expand slower, you have to mine more, you need more to put a rocket up, you need a lot more resources to be doing research, you probably have to outpost more, and it's probably just, not something that you can do in one sitting that really adds all that much to, in comparison to, say, an 80% run or a default settings run. All of the skills and the skill expression you've already got in there, which is a shame, because in Marathon all the builds are different because some of the ratios are different, and it would be nice to get Marathon into at least some of the categories. The second part is the Deathworld bit, in that almost no one runs Deathworld either, which I also reckon is a bit of a shame, because that's, we were complaining, were we complaining? I was complaining about the small amount of combat that's left in high-level wave defense and Rocket Rush, and that getting a bit more of that in could make runs more interesting, a bit more dynamic, a bit more decisions having to be made on the fly, which, those are the sorts of runs I like doing and watching. But the thing is, almost no one runs Deathworld. I think Andy and Nephrem's have between them 3 completed Deathworld runs that are at least have been submitted, and that's all the Deathworld anyone's seen, which is a bit of a shame. So certainly Deathworld Marathon is just off the table for speedrunning. It just does not work. The thing about Marathon is it also doesn't bump up any of the patch richness. So you've got to launch a rocket, like normal marathon, do all the research, launch a rocket. Everything is like, normal marathon is about 8 times more expensive because the recipes are about twice as expensive, and then the research is about 4 times as expensive. And then Deathworld is also just Deathworld Marathon, just straight up no good because the pollution absorption is less, which means you're doing 8 times the amount of pollution. The pollution is getting absorbed less and spawning more biters. You have to expand more because you need roughly 8 times as many resources, and the patches are the same size, and it's a Deathworld. So Deathworld Marathon, like, fun, interesting, just not speedrunnable. Whereas Deathworld Marathon Rocket Rush, the whole 4 times price multiplier for research just disappears because you don't do research in Rocket Rush. The rocket is twice as much expensive. Like the rocket itself is roughly twice as expensive. The patches are the same size, which means you quite possibly maybe outposting becomes a thing. Maybe you just suck it up and take twice as long. Neither of those, like taking twice as long isn't very speedrunner, and outposting is another fun default settings strat. And it happens on Deathworld too, and you just go around it on Wave Defense and Rocket Rush normal. Whereas on Marathon it might be relevant. And then the next thing to consider, Rocket Rush Deathworld Marathon. The next thing to consider is the increased expense of everything also affects how much starting equipment you want. Like, it used to be that I think I took 70 of these, and like I'm trying to replicate what I previously had, something like that. I mean, these aren't quite balanced, but whatever. And then I wanted a couple of these for run safety. I wanted, some of that stuff to kick the power grid off. I wanted, a bunch of these. We'll get fewer of these because I know I don't have as much. I want a car, and then, we just kind of ran out of funds. Like when I was doing this, when I was looking at this, the Rocket Rush default settings, I could have all of the stuff that I wanted. I had like twice as many of the undergrounds and the other inserters. I had a lot more basic inserters. I had more belt, and then I had money sitting around for a roboboard if I wanted. Whereas the thing I'm enjoying about Deathworld Marathon Rocket Rush is that the opportunity cost of what you buy really hits you hard in the immediate settings, which also slows down the problem that Rocket Rush has of being too fast, and also gets you past the somewhat frustrating early game of how do you even go fast and stay alive in a death world. Like if you wanted, like you can get rid of stuff by selling it back. Like that's what the trash slots do. Like because the thing was like, if I want to get, do you want a roboboard? Do you want to start with a roboboard? How much does this thing even cost? So you only start with like, is it 6k you start with, or is it 15k? I forget how much money you start with, but like this is not cheap. So do instead, do you want to like not make, do you want to get enough rid chips for less money and manufacture the steel and cogs yourself? Do you want to, instead of the plastic, or instead of the rid chips, do you want to get a bunch of plastic, make the green chips yourself, make a bunch of red chips early, and make the roboport yourself? Is that, like, even if you're going to do a roboport rush strategy, because you've got 25 bots, like this is more than twice the bots, like Wave Defense you get 10, Rocket Rush you get 25, maybe if you're trying to do an early roboport so you can go and outpost some things, or you can be somewhere else or have bots building stuff or whatever, like you have a lot less space in this initial set of equipment to figure out what you're going to trade away in order to make the things work. Like I think that's like some interesting opportunity cost stuff. Do I have let's actually get some more of these, because like there was one other thing that I kind of wanted to mention. Whatever. Okay. Yeah. So the other thing is, we could even see from the preview, or like you can kind of tell this in the preview. I'm not sure if I went to the preview. In default settings, Rocket Rush, you start with 100 rockets, and I reckon that's probably enough to basically clear every nest that you're ever going to be worried about. I think that's what happened in the runs that I did. Like, I didn't bother building anything military, just built my copper mining, had my rocket parts going, just leaned on these 100 rockets to clear all the nests. But the thing is, in Deathworld, you don't, like, this is not going to be enough. What button did I want? Yeah, I don't actually reckon that's going to be enough rockets to clear the number of, what was I doing? Because in there, to clear the sorts of bases that you have to worry about on a Deathworld, because, you know, right here, I'm spending 6 rockets, and I kind of need to clear that. And okay, so this is also a thing about map re-rolling, but I reckon you'll run out of the 100 rockets. And then you're back into the question of, okay, so now I've got to build, I have to build some kind of military response in Deathworld Marathon Rocket Rush. And the thing is, there are big biters out now. So the Evo starts the same, but there are big biters out, which means that the landmine push is going to be kinda spicy if you're doing it in a car, because these guys, you know, 375 health, you've got 450 health, and there's some damage reduction for crashing, I think, maybe that's just the tank. Yeah, in any way, landmine pushing into a bunch of big biters and big spitters is, you know, quite interesting. So I think the interesting things about that are, like, number one, what combat situation do you want at all? And I think I'm kind of leaning towards more rockets, because you can just do the same thing, but like, maybe you're doing, where is it? Yeah, maybe you're doing defend robots, because you've got all the upgrades. Maybe you're doing a poison capsules thing, because, like, you don't really want to stop near the bigs, although even doing anything in a car with bigs around is a bit spicy. Maybe you are doing a landmines thing, especially if you are outposting a thing, but also because you're not doing research, you don't necessarily need to automate robot frames. So how are you replacing the landmines on your outpost? Are you replacing the landmines on your outpost? The rockets will one-shot nests, so they're kind of nice, but it's still, the other nice thing about just continuing that is that they're currently, I don't think there are any other categories in speedrunning, maybe 100%, where rockets are relevant. Because they don't usually one-shot nests, you need quite a few of them, you need to spend research to get the firing speed upgrades to crank enough of them off, but you know, in Rocket Rush, we already start with all of the upgrades. Like, these things, you know, our rocket launcher is going to start off, wow, at, like, yeah, standard speed is 1 when you unlock it, and we're firing rockets at like 4.4 hertz, which is pretty great. So the other things, yeah, I was going to talk about standard builds on it. Like, everyone will probably be pretty familiar with most of these. Like, that's not how you do it. That's not how you do it either. Okay, just do 2 at a time, you silly person. Like, a standard green chips geometry is something like this. And yeah, in default settings, you'll do something like this, because you won't be bothered getting the inserter upgrade speeds, and then, you know, something like, you know, maybe something like that, maybe something different, who knows. Like, the ones on this side are kind of less relevant, because they depend a bit more on the stuff, but something like this. And then when I'm doing it in both Wave Defense and Rocket Rush, because you have the insert bonuses, you don't actually need these ones. And in fact, you can, like, when you've got the inserted capacity bonuses, this is enough, which also means that I could do things like, yeah, I think the way that I'd set it up was, yeah, like that, and then, is it? I forget, I haven't actually run that for a while. Yeah, something like yeah. That's what it would look like. Yeah, and then there was another box here. So this is one of the standard ways of doing stuff. Another fairly standard way of doing stuff with normal recipes is actually it's the same one like this, isn't it? Doing not that one. Doing your 3 to 2 like this, and then I think I started like this in wave defense and then went to this pattern. This pattern's nice because you can just grab it and then just keep copying it down. But this is like using the building speeds to manage the ratio between coils and chips, and this one is using the number of assemblers to manage the ratio between coils and chips. But the thing is, in expensive mode, that's not the ratio you want. And so the other reason why I'm keen on getting expensive mode into speedruns is because now we have to have different patterns that will actually, they probably need to be fast. These ones will need to be fast, but these ones, yeah, now we've got different patterns that will like give us good ratios between coils and chips, which means basically all the bases are different. And also you can't easily copy this thing and stack it down into larger builds in the same way that you can with the normal one. So that's the first build that's going to have to change significantly, which I like. The other one is the LDS, because LDS, like the normal wave defense way of doing this was to have like 2 belts of copper in and then a belt split between plastic and steel. And maybe you'd arrange those kind of differently. Maybe I think I would end up sometimes also splitting the plastic and steel belt, but the total throughput was still half lane plastic, half lane steel, 2 lanes of copper. But that doesn't work here. We're going to need a completely different geometry, because we need to be able to pile more plastic into the LDS than copper. And this is kind of interesting for 2 reasons. Number one, the geometry of the LDS has to change. That's kind of less interesting. The more interesting bit is that this significantly changes the resource profile that you need to be launching a rocket in expensive mode. And so I think that's kind of the second part. Is it the second part? I haven't really been counting. But that's like the other bit of why I think this is going to be interesting. The first bit being, so your wave defense, the previous bases that we had for normal ratioed recipes just will not work here, and we'll have to replan all of that. The second thing about why I think it'll be interesting is it will go from kind of the one resource bottleneck we had for wave defense and rocket rush, which was, how quickly can you get 3 lanes of copper? I think that'll turn into 3 distinct resource bottlenecks on Rocket Rush Deathworld Marathon. There'll be, actually I should put I should put these guys back so I can point at them. The first one being, okay, so we know we need a lot more copper. The copper bottleneck is still absolutely going to be a thing, but I don't even think that the starter patches are probably going to support the amount of copper we will want to go fast on expensive mode. So bottleneck number 1, still copper. Bottleneck number 2, petrochems, because we want a lot of plastic, and we might even have to outpost oil multiple times. And those two together lead us into bottleneck 3, which is defense, I reckon. I think on Rocket Rush Deathworld Marathon, we'll actually have to worry about defending stuff in a way that we can kind of ignore, skip past, or go quickly with both wave defense and Rocket Rush default settings. And yeah, it is, I've got a couple of ideas about how I might go quickly in Rocket Rush Deathworld Marathon, and that's kind of what I'm interested in. That's going to be, how do we go quickly? What defensive plans do we want? What are the good ways to outpost? How do we automate bots? Is it worth automating bots for landmine defenses? Is it worth automating bots to be building more smelting lanes while we're outposting more? If we are outposting, do we go up to 4, even 5 belts of copper? Do we actually need more iron than the starter patches, because the steel also takes more iron than usual, and the green chips also take more iron than usual? So is the starter patch of iron even enough? There's probably going to be a lot of re-rolling, but there is in Deathworld Marathon just normal research settings, non-Rocket Rush anyway. But yeah, I think Rocket Rush Deathworld Marathon has some interesting potential. I think it's going to be more interesting than Rocket Rush, and I also like getting the combat back into it. So I might think about that a bit. I might do a couple of those runs and see whether or not it ends up interesting. And it probably will. It sounds interesting. It's one of the things where I don't even know what. I'm not entirely sure what a good start is or what a good strategy is yet. I've got some ideas, but we need to play with it, and that's why I think this is interesting.